Hi, my name is Nick Burge, and I'm the science educator and coordinator here at Country Gardens Charter School, the beautiful Country Gardens Charter School here in Laveen, Arizona. I stand before our beautiful Sonoran Desert Tortoise habitat here at Country Gardens, a habitat that the students and I have created over the past couple years. The area that we're standing in is called the Wilds. That stands for Wilderness Investigations for Learning, Discoveries, and Science. Program started by myself and several of the other administrators here. My bachelor's degree is in elementary education with a focus, or a specialty if you will, in science. My background with animals, I've grown up with animals all my life, literally all my life. When I was about 3-4 years old, we moved here to Arizona. We moved to 40 acres, very far west of the city of Phoenix, Arizona, in the wonderful, wonderful desert weather. We don't live here for the summers, folks, definitely for the winters. I grew up on a farm out there. We had basically every domestic animal you can possibly think of: cows, pigs, ducks, horses, everything. By the time I was 7 or 8 years old, I'd probably birthed almost everything under the sun, had my arms shoulder deep in a couple cows and horses and several other large mammals. Raised many different types of animals of my own, but my main specialty, of course, was the chickens. That was my forte, if you will, my big thing, my chickens. I loved my chickens when I was a kid. And one of the best stories I can tell you is I was fascinated by the process of a chicken laying an egg. And I was absolutely enamored. I had to know where these eggs came from, because, you know, you lift up the bottom of a chicken, there's two very small, what looks like holes there. You know, as a child, you have no idea how this big, giant egg can come out of that little thing. So I sat in the chicken house one day for about 4 or 5 hours, just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then finally, and I was, lift up the egg, lift up the chicken, here's the egg. Still didn't know where it came from. And I was bound and determined to find out where that egg came from. So the next day, sat out there for 8.5 hours in the chicken coop, sitting there waiting. And finally, when I heard her moving around and getting ready, I lifted up the back end of the chicken and I watched that chicken lay that egg. Meanwhile, my parents are going absolutely insane. They're going crazy. They're trying to find me. They have no idea where I'm at. And they were about to call in search and rescue, and they finally found me in the chicken coop. And they're, "Where have you been? Oh my God, what are you doing?" And then I was looking for a chicken, watching a chicken laying an egg. And now I know. And I was so absolutely proud of myself. I was about 5 or 6 when that happened. Other things I grew up with on the farm, I grew up with many, many desert animals, catching lizards and running around catching all kinds of animals and seeing different things. By the time I was 8 years old, I had made an entire map of the 40 acres that we lived on, and I had labeled every single cactus, every single wash, every single place where I had found an animal, anything that you could possibly think of, I had labeled on my map. I also, by that point, by the time I was 10 to 12 years old, I had traveled almost all of the lower 48 states with my family, seeing different national parks, seeing different parts of the country and many, many different species of animals. My grandfather has a cabin near Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where I spent many summers in Yellowstone Park, observing elk and moose and deer and bear and things, you know, all kinds of platypi. No, I'm just kidding, that's Australia. All kinds of crazy things, unicorns and all kinds of, no, not really. But point being, many, many different species throughout my entire life, up until the point of when I decided to start doing this as a career, which is about junior high, or, you know, right before high school or so. As an adult, my animal expertise runs the gamut from many, many different species. I have a very large specialty in reptiles and amphibians. Been studying those for as long as I can remember. Many, many different species of reptiles and amphibians, not only through the school, but also in my spare time as well. I'm an avid field herper, as they call it. I've been to many, many different countries throughout North America, Latin America, and parts of the Caribbean and the coast of South America to explore and look for different reptiles and amphibians and many other different species as well, both for work and for my personal life as well. I'm also a board member with the Arizona Herpetological Association. Have been a board member for going on 2 to 3 years now. We do education events all over the state and even in different parts of the country as well, utilizing native reptiles. Been all over the state of Arizona looking for native reptiles as well. Many species of rattlesnakes. I work with many species of reptiles and amphibians here as well at the school. We do an amateur exotic animal rescue where we take in many different types of animals, find them good homes after they've recovered if they were in a bad situation. If not, they have a good home here with us at CGCS. Here at CGCS, at Country Gardens Charter School, we work with many different species. We're working with many different native species of animals, including several species of rattlesnakes, Crotalus machelli-pyrus, the speckled rattlesnake, a couple different varieties of those. We also work with western diamondbacks, sidewinders, besides desert tortoises, snoring mud turtles, several species of frogs and toads. In Costa Rica, we work with and do population studies. Last year we did population studies in over 370 different species. That includes every classification you can think of. Insects, birds, mammals, frogs, people, just a little bit on the people, not as interesting. Many different types of classification of animals that we deal with in other countries. We also deal with species in Panama. I've worked with and dealt with every species of Dendrobates pumilio, every morph of Dendrobates pumilio in the Panamanian Bocas del Toro area. The Bastamentos morph, the Isla Colon morph, all the different species, all the different color morphs there. I've dealt with species ranging from giant draft horses all the way down to the tiniest little cockroaches and jumping spiders. Many different species in my repertoire, if you will. I'm also fascinated with and have worked somewhat with primates at a monkey rescue down in Costa Rica. I've also worked a little bit here and there with big cats, mainly tracking them in the wild, some experience with jaguars and ocelots and margays in Costa Rica and Panama as well. I've also worked a little bit here and there with cephalopods. Cephalopods, literally the Latin meaning head-foot animal. That covers a large gamut of animals, including snails and other certain bivalves and things like that. But the main ones I'm interested in are squid, octopi, cuttlefish, and nautiluses. Absolutely fascinating group of animals. Absolutely incredible. The intelligence, the adaptability and variability. Awesome. I have extensive work in many different types of ecosystems, including the biggest thing that we study here at CGCS, which is urban wildlife and its interactions with people and different populations of people in urban situations. Fearless is a misnomer word to me, because to be fearful of something, you have to have a preconceived notion of what that animal is. Since I grew up with no such notions of anything, and I grew up appreciating an incredibly inherent beauty of the entire natural world as a whole, and all species as a whole, from the tiniest little maggot all the way up to the biggest blue whale, the fearless thing doesn't really apply to me. I don't really have a fear of any type of animal. I am cautious when it comes to certain animals and certain species, as one would tend to be. However, I am not particularly fearful of any particular type of animal. If I'm not there to harm the animal, therefore, and I have that positive attitude, it will more than likely not want to harm me. Hopefully. Usually that's the case. However, some scars that I have probably tell a different story, but we'll get to that later. When it comes to the fearless thing as well, I'm not sure which part of it I like best. The initial catch and capture, if you will. The part where maybe the animals fight back and struggle a little bit, or something crazy happens. Or the part when they finally get very calmed down and you can easily interact with the animal and educate people about that animal and its beauty and the things about it that apply to the natural world and apply to us as well. A war story. Alright, probably my best war story I could tell, besides, like I said, numerous little scars here and there of different things that have happened to me over the years. My best war story of all probably has to do with the brackish water Cayman Lagoon, which is right next to the lodge that the Piedras Blancas Biological Research Station that we utilize with my students when we're down in Costa Rica, usually in January for between 6 to 8 weeks. The brackish water lagoon is about 2 to 3 acres of brackish water. Brackish water mean salt water coming in from the ocean, fresh water coming out from the land, from natural springs and from rainwater, and the two mixing together. So it's not as salty, not as high a salinity as salt water, but at the same time, it's not fresh water. Some animals can stand to drink it, but most are not going to bother drinking it. But animals can exist in this. So, this brackish water lagoon is home to many species of frogs, many species of birds, fish, other amphibians, some reptiles. The main reptile we are always interested, though, is our spectacled caiman population. They vary during the wet and the dry season, depending how much water is there, between the least we've ever seen is 20, the max we've ever seen by counting eyes and capturing a few and checking sex and whatnot is about 200 animals. So quite a few, even in this very small, isolated ecosystem. The thing we're always trying to find out is, where do they go? How many are male? How many are female? How are they interacting with each other? How many times are they mating? How many nests are there? So forth and so on. And we've been compiling data for this for several years. Point being, one year it was the dry season. Very, very dry. Very, very little water. Almost less than a foot in most areas of the lagoon. Very, very bad. We weren't finding hardly any caiman. That was one of those years it was maybe between 20 and 50 that we were actually seeing on any given night. However, one night, we're looking out at the caiman lagoon and we're trying to find the eye shiner. Oh, there's very few of them. We're maybe tossing out, a few chicken bones to try to get them interested. Oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. We got to count these caiman. We got to get good data. And all of a sudden, my cameraman says, "Hey, Mr. Nick, there's a big pair of eyes over there." And we're like, Reggie? And we started walking that way, and lo and behold, huge big old pair of eyes. Way over here in the dry part, deep in about 4.5 feet of solid, just mud, muck, rotting junk. But you do what you can with what you have. So we went over there and we creeped over, and I found a stick, and I just, handy dandy, of course, sticks. You got to have your poking stick. So we got close to the spectacled caiman, or what we thought was a spectacled caiman. We poked a little bit and he moved just ever so slightly. And then we saw he was between about 6.5 to 7 feet long, snout to tail. So, okay, well, we found a big one. Yay, sweet. Now what? Okay, so I removed my shirt. Need something to put around the mouth, because as you know, the mouth muscles that open the mouth are very weak. You can hold them closed with one hand. But the muscles that close that mouth are extremely, extremely strong. Can usually snap cattle bones like kindling on a dry fire. So, basically, I crouched behind the spectacled caiman with the shirt, placed the shirt over the head, grabbed the mouth, and he immediately started to wiggle around. It was like I was riding a mechanical bull. Wiggle around, and then finally I grabbed him and pulled him up and just lifted him up, and he goes, BAM! Like that, right onto my chest. And we'll talk about how cool that was later, because of what it did. So we're lifting him up, and I pull him up onto the mud, and I get him up, and he wiggles around again like this, and he whips the freaking shirt right out of my hand. And then as I go back down to go like that, he goes and snaps, and literally, I'm not even joking, if this is his mouth and this is my hand goes down, and he just whoosh within inches of my hand. Just absolute inches. So then I just took my hand and just thunk right on top of his head. And then we pulled him up, and he calmed down a bit. We wrapped his, and then of course we forgot tape. We forgot any kind of tape or anything to wrap his mouth. So one of my students removed the string, the drawstring from his shorts, and we used that to tie around his mouth carefully, not hurting the animal. We figured out the sex of the animal. We made some notes on any markings or scars so we could track him. It was a male, it was a large male. Students interacted with him for a while, took some video, got some pictures, and eventually we released him and took the thing off of his mouth. When I got up, when he had hit me in the chest like such, he had left a perfect image of every single scale from his snout all the way down to about mid-body in this huge tattoo-like mud imprint across my entire chest. It was absolutely amazing. And of course, my student's first thing, "Oh, Mr. Nick, you should get a tattoo like that." I'm like, I'm like, his bite would have been painful enough. That tattoo would hurt very badly. I'm cool with that. No thanks. So that's probably my best overall war story or one of probably several hundred or thousands that I could tell you, but that one's a very, very good one.